It's that time of the year, when everyone and their dog is trying to predict the outcome of the upcoming MotoGP season. As a YouTuber who covers a sport, I'm obligated to make a predictions video for the upcoming year. That being said, I think these videos are fun to watch, but in the end, kind of boring. If you've seen one, you've seen them all. Why should you care what I have to say? I'm just a person in a room who decided to press record one day. So, alongside my predictions, I asked you to give me all of your predictions and hot takes for the 2025 season. And I'm going to be responding to those while also giving you my thoughts for the upcoming year. I figured this would be a better way to get everyone involved and make it more of a community thing as opposed to just me yapping at a camera and getting everything wrong, more than likely. I'm B, this is the Beehive Paddock, and today I'm reading yours and giving my predictions for the 2025 MotoGP season. Considering I only made one community post about this, you guys responded in force. Thank you so much to everyone who commented. I might not be able to get to all of them, just because a lot of them are very similar to other ones, so if I don't answer yours, I apologize. In addition, I am recording this on Tuesday, January 21st, so if you left a comment after that point, it might be really good, but I simply didn't see it. I would like to start with a comment left by channel member MBP2112. Look at that cool little bee next to their name. If you want a bee next to your name and a shout out at the end of every video, press the join button below to become a channel member. Shameless plug aside, let's see what MBP2112 has to say. Injuries will play a huge role this season. At least one title contender will be lost for a couple of weekends after being involved in a big sprint T1 crash as everybody dives bomb and everybody else and bodies go flying. Yamaha's V4 will have teething pains, but Fabio will sneak onto a podium before year end. Aprilia and Martin will be competitive early, but will fade as the GP25 gets dialed in. Marc Marquez will extract the most from the platform as long as he isn't one of the aforementioned flying bodies, will be in position to win the title. So I'm not going to address any of the injury stuff. I hate speculating on stuff like that, and honestly, you can never really predict it, so there's no point. All I can say is I hope you're wrong. But what I really want to talk about is the rest of this comment, because it almost perfectly reflects a lot of my opinions. I do think Fabio Quartararo will get a podium this year. He looked extremely strong towards the end of last year and was putting up some competitive performances. In addition, in terms of riding ability, he's a top 4 rider bare minimum right now in my opinion, and I think that he's really going to surprise people. There's obviously no way to predict how good Yamaha's V4 is going to be. Yamaha has said that they don't want the V4 to come out until it is equal to or better than the inline 4. Whether or not they're going to stay true to that remains to be seen, but assuming they do and Fabio Quartararo is able to gel with it, then I think that a podium is incredibly likely. Now on to Aprilia and Martin. I mostly agree with this take. If you look at last season, the Aprilias were very competitive early on, and then as the GP24 got dialed in, they sort of faded. The question at this point really comes down to how much Aprilia was able to improve, and truthfully, there is simply no way of knowing this. I do think it'll be a similar story though. I think Martin is so dominant in the sprint format, and that will carry over to the Aprilia. I think that in a straight sprint, there's no one faster in the world in my opinion, and I think that as the season wears on, maybe you start to see the Ducatis just getting more and more dialed in, like you said, and then Martin ends up being outpaced. But early on, I think that sprints are going to be his main path to being competitive. And of course, the big one, Marc Marquez. I expect this to be a very close title fight, just like we've seen over the past few years, but I do think that Marquez will come out on top. I'll be honest, I thought he was washed. I thought it was over, and I was very wrong. He won 3 races last year on a GP23 against GP24s, which is, as we know, a huge technical gap to overcome, and he's clearly shown that he can work with the Ducati platform. Obviously, the 23 to the 24 was a huge jump, and Ducati has said that it was a bigger jump than the 24 to the 25 will be, so who knows, maybe there will be an adjustment period for Marquez, and it'll take him a little while to really get dialed in with the machine. I mean, we definitely saw that last year, so I don't think it'll be that severe, but I do think there might be a little bit of time where Bagnaia can get some points in early. In the end, 8 world championships, 12, 13 seasons of experience, and he looks like he's back. I mean, he really does look like he's back. It's gonna be a wild season regardless, but right now, before the season starts, I'm locking in Marc Marquez as my pick for the 2025 World Riders Champion. This one comes from Rick05, and it's about something I don't usually like to speculate on because I almost always get it wrong. Rider transfers. I have some predictions about rider transfers. 1. Morbidelli gets sacked and Marini comes back to VR46. 2. Ethan Guevara will take the Pramac ride over Jack Miller. 3. HRC will sign a rookie, someone like Sergio Garcia. Like I said, I suck at predicting rider transfers. I am horrible at it, and for the most part, I don't even try. I just sit back and watch what happens. I will say though, I really do like your first prediction here. Morbidelli had a GP24 last year, and he really got nothing done with it. He'll be on the same bike this year, but now there's way more competition. We've got Alex Marquez, Digi on a GP25, and Fermin Aldeguer, who I expect Morbidelli to at least beat Fermin Aldeguer, but everyone else, it's looking a little rough. And for obvious reasons, Marini is a prime choice to go back to VR46. However, and I believe this came out after you wrote this comment, so I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but recently there's been a lot of rumors floating around that Valentino Rossi has been scouting Pedro Acosta, who could get out of his KTM deal early considering their whole financial situation. Simply because there's, I wouldn't say concrete evidence, but people talking. I would maybe vote Acosta to get that seat over Marini, but who knows? Number 2 is Ethan Guevara taking the Pramac ride over Jack Miller. Now, in terms of Guevara taking the ride over Jack Miller, I don't think Miller will last that much longer. I think it'll depend on how much development the Yamaha really needs, because that's why he's there. He's not there to win races, he's there to help develop the bike. If they feel they've got a good enough part-time to where maybe they can take him on part-time in 2026 as a test rider, I do think that of the 4 Yamaha riders, he's the most likely to be replaced. And frankly, unless he has an incredible season out of nowhere, or unless Honda takes him on as a development rider, I don't see another place for him to go. Now, in terms of Guevara taking on his role, I think there are a few better candidates in Moto2 right now. Whether or not they would take the Yamaha ride is questionable, but I think most would. And I think that Yamaha might have a couple of other choices, think like an Aaron Canet, a Sergio Garcia, before you go directly to Guevara, but anything is possible. Somkiat Chantra's in MotoGP after all. And finally, HRC will sign a rookie, someone like Sergio Garcia. It is entirely possible, but I think that if Joan Mir stays on, there's another outcome that I'll talk about later that makes a little more sense. This one comes from Frideric Zopa 4348. I really hope I got that right, who says Alex Marquez will win his first ever Premier Class Grand Prix. I agree with this. He was the fastest in 2024's postseason testing. He's on a GP24 this year, which we know is going to be a competitive bike because they've said that the 24 to 25 gap is less than the 23 to 24 gap. Marquez has been looking increasingly good throughout the years during his career, and with a podium last year on a 23 competing against 24s, I do think a win looks likely. Ooh, this is a good one. From Kinesis 6570, Fabio finishes top 6 in the championship. I'm assuming you're talking about Quartararo and not Di Antonio, who I think everyone is expecting to finish a little higher than top 6. I could see this happening, but there's a lot of talent on better bikes right now. Now, we don't know how good Yamaha's V4 is going to be, but on KTM you've got Brad Binder, Pedro Acosta, Maverick Vinales, and Enea Bastianini. The KTM was seriously outpacing the Yamaha last year, and those are 4 really, really good riders. I don't think any of them are as skilled as Fabio Quartararo is, but they're on a better bike. Combine that with a defending world champion on a factory Aprilia, 3 GP24s and 3 GP25s, and I hate that I'm saying this, but the bikes matter. Quartararo is incredibly skilled. I am predicting a podium from him this year. Will he be able to keep that level of consistency up? We'll see. I really hope so. I would love to see him and Yamaha be competitive again, but top 6 feels a little too high at this time. I'm top 10 for sure. I think top 10 for sure, but top 6 feels a little optimistic. This one comes from Robot Lunchbox Productions, who says Jorge Martin will be a title contender. Yeah. Yes and no. I think that Martin and Di Antonio will both fill the role that Marquez and Bastianini filled last year, sort of being what I call fringe title contenders, where they are undeniably very, very good. They're like a clear second tier, but it would take a mathematical miracle for them to end up winning. I think they'll be the last 2 riders mathematically eliminated from contention at the end of the year, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to be Bagnaia and Marquez running away with it. I'm not even going to try with this name. Aprilia will win the Contractors Championship. Well, in terms of the Contractors Championship, I have not heard news of it, but the Constructors Championship, no, you're out of your mind. I'm sorry. There's simply no way. Ducati is running away with this. Their worst bike now is the GP24, which was the most dominant Grand Prix bike we've seen since the MV Augusta. It simply doesn't make sense. You've got 6 riders on a GP24 or better, and you've got 4 total Aprilia riders, one of whom is a rookie. I don't know. I simply don't see it. This one comes from Dr. Pepperoni, who has a take that I don't want to believe is true. says Acosta may win a sprint but not a GP. I don't know about this one. Acosta did come close to winning a couple of Grands Prix last year. He was fighting for the lead on a satellite KTM. Now he's got factory support, but that factory support does kind of come with like an asterisk, which is what factory is even left. I don't think KTM is really going to make a ton of progress with their bike this year, if I'm being honest. Plus, he's fighting against an increased field of Ducatis. I do think Acosta has the skill to win a Grand Prix this year, but that's about it. But in my opinion, it's sort of like 50-50. I want to believe it's true, but we'll see. This leads me into a comment from Top Gear 2021. Pedro Acosta, 2025 World Riders Champion. Oh yes, I really am that delusional. It's okay to be that delusional. See, my delusion is that the Yamaha V4 is going to be amazing, and every single race this year is going to be run in the rain, and Jack Miller will be your World Riders Champion for 2025. In all seriousness though, no, he is outmatched, outgunned on every front. The Ducatis are starting with a better bike, and they're going to have probably better factory support. Like I said, KTM has been very inconsistent on what they're actually going to be able to give their riders in terms of factory support this year, so we'll see. Plus, you've got Marc Marquez on a GP25, Bagnaia on a GP25, Martin on a factory Aprilia, Digia on a GP25. I think all four of those guys probably have a better chance than Acosta this year. Sadly, Acosta's going to have to wait a little longer. This one comes from a hearty Nice name, bro. This comment comes from a hearty low punny. A Japanese bike will win a race. Yamaha have much more data now. Honda have two very good wet riders. If they make progress this winter, they can easily win a race with a bit of luck on their side. I would love for this to be true, but I simply don't see it. I have said I think Quartararo gets a podium, and of all 8 riders on Japanese bikes this year, he is definitely the most likely in my opinion. The Hondas just had nothing last year. And sure, Honda may have good wet weather riders, but in my opinion, the best wet weather riders are Jack Miller on the Yamaha and Brad Binder on the KTM. I'm not sure a Honda's beating either of those in a wet weather race. And in terms of a little bit of luck, I think it'll take more than that. Fabio Quartararo almost got a podium last year. He did before it was taken away. And in order for that to happen, he needed almost everyone in front of him to crash out of the race. I believe 5 people. I believe 5 people crashed out of the sprint ahead of him. I think it'll take less luck than that to get a podium this year, but still some. I think a win is pushing it a little bit. All right, we've got this comment from Corton GP, and I'm not going to respond to all of it, but I do want to highlight a couple of the points here. First of all, number 2. Zarco being top Honda once again and goes to the factory Honda team for 2026. This is what I was talking about earlier. Zarco was very clearly the rider who was best able to use the Honda last year. If he's able to replicate that performance again, which I think is highly likely, it makes all the sense in the world that Honda would want him on their factory squad. Morbidelli somehow will finish top 3 in the standings. No. And lastly, 5, Chantra to outscore Mir. Like, I get it. It's funny to hate on Joan Mir. He won a world championship against a weak grid in 2020, and since then has gone on to do not a whole lot. But let's be real here. He is still a world champion. He still outscored 20 plus other riders in a season at one point. And you're expecting a guy who finished outside of the top 10 in Moto2 last year, granted injuries, I understand, but outside of the top 10 in Moto2 last year, to come in as a rookie on a satellite team on the same bike as him, which is notoriously terrible to ride, and you want him to outscore him? It's just not going to happen. This one comes from Angie Mazing. 4 of the Ducatis will be winning at least one race. I agree with this. I think very clearly Bagnaia and Marquez will win races. I think Digia might get a couple in there, and as I've said, I think Alex Marquez is going to win one. So I agree. I think at least 4 Ducatis will win a race this year. From Avago 3346. Excluding sprints, no non-Ducatis will win a race. Marc Marquez won't win the title. Alright, I've addressed the second part of that, but no non-Ducatis will win a race? I think that's a little extreme. You know, especially at the beginning of the year while Ducati's still getting stuff dialed in, KTM and Aprilia have a serious chance. KTM has the fastest engine in MotoGP, and Aprilia has the defending champion on their side. Binder, Acosta, Bastianini, Vinales, Bezzecchi, Martin, at least one of those guys is taking one win off the Ducatis this year. And in general, I think that the GP24 was sort of the peak of Ducati's domination. I think that from now on the gap is going to close, and then in 2027, who knows what's going to happen. Maybe I'm just inhaling a ton of copium right now because I want the series to be about riders and not bikes again, but who really knows. From Guilherme Botello 8691. Not so hot, but I think Bagnaia will lose to Marc mainly for being too nice. I still admire and like him for being nice, so I hope I'm wrong. I think Bagnaia will lose to Marc Marquez because Marc Marquez is a better rider. Bagnaia is a nice guy off the track, but on the track, it's a different story. I've seen him ride aggressively and make plenty of aggressive moves. Think Malaysia of last year when he was fighting tooth and nail against Jorge Martin. He's a nice guy, and I don't think that's going to be what stops him from winning a championship. I think Marc will just outride him. That being said, we'll see if he stays nice. Who knows? Things could get heated. When's the last time we had like an actual like super team in MotoGP where it was like the two best riders and they didn't hate each other? Alright, this comment comes from Juwaza, and I'm focusing on the second half of this. Chantra should be Rookie of the Year, but no luck and several high-speed crashes will prevent that. Competition even closer except for the Ducatis. I generally agree with this. I think that most of the teams are going to start to get closer together from here on out. With that being said, Chantra should be Rookie of the Year over the Moto2 defending champion and Fermín Aldeguer, who was inconsistent last year, but that 2023 run, really, Chantra? I'm like, okay, Chantra seems like a very cool guy. I'm glad that he made it to MotoGP, but he is in a terrible situation. And he is, in my opinion, clearly not as skilled of a rider at this point in his career as Ayagura and Fermín Aldeguer are. For my money, I think Ayagura will be Rookie of the Year. It seems like Aprilia is planning on giving all their riders factory spec bikes, but I think the race will be close. I think Agura beats out Aldeguer on skill, but Aldeguer has the better bike. Who's going to win? I don't know. I can't really call it. My heart says it's probably going to be Agura, but I want to go with Aldeguer just because I like Cressini. But gun to my head, if you're forcing me to make a prediction, I'd say Ayagura will likely be Rookie of the Year. This one comes from Tomniverse, who says Stoner will complain about technology. Yep. This feels like it has a 100% likelihood of happening. When's the last time Stoner didn't complain about technology? Finally, from Wild Ride 7894. I think Bez is really going to step it up this season. Had a rough one in 24, but I really think Martin as a teammate is really going to cause him to start pushing himself. I've been a proponent that Bez has the capacity to be a great rider and a serious title contender. We already saw him have an incredible season in 2023, and he claims that the GP23 just didn't suit him, and that's why last year he had so many struggles. With factory support behind him and the ability to help develop a bike, alongside a teammate who can really push him, I think that Bez is going to have a great year. Is he going to win a race? I don't know, but I do think that last year was the anomaly and not 2023. I think Bez has great things ahead of him and could be a riders champion come a few years. And that is the end of the Q&A section. Obviously, this mostly focused on MotoGP. Real quick, let me run through my championship predictions for the other three classes. Moto2 seems really hard to predict right now. You have a ton of great challengers, but me personally, I'm going to go with Aaron Canet. He had a fantastic second half to his season, and I think that that's going to translate into this season. I would really love to see him do well. Of course, he's got a ton of good competition to put up with, and quite frankly, there's probably 7 or 8 valid choices that I couldn't really find a flaw with. But personally, I'm going with Canet. Moto3 is another extremely difficult one. So much of the great talent moved up to Moto2 this year, and my pick might be a little unorthodox. I'm going with Angel Piqueras. He had one of the best rides I've ever seen last year, coming to 22nd to 1st for his very first Grand Prix win. Now that he's already been to all the tracks once, I think that he's going to kick it into gear. This might be an ill-advised pick, coming a little bit more from my heart than my brain, but you know, it's my video. Lastly, Moto E. Maybe the hardest one to predict because it's so short and it's a spec class. In my opinion though, I'm going to give it to Mattia Casadei. The 2023 World Champion and 2024 Vice World Champion really just had a couple of very inconsistent rounds in the Netherlands and Germany this year. If he can clean those up and just get a little more consistent, I think that he can easily beat defending champion Hector Garzo. Watch Moto E. Moto E is so good. And that's all the predictions I have to share with you today. Obviously, I wasn't able to cover everything, but who is? And I like this format a lot better than just rattling off my takes. Leave your predictions in the comments down below. I'd love to read them. I'm extremely excited for this season to get started so I can be proven wrong over and over again. In all seriousness, I am just itching for this season to get going. It's looking to be so exciting. All of the different rider moves, so many different storylines to cover. It's gonna be amazing. Please drop a like and leave a comment if you want to help push this video out into the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you want more coming into your feed, and if you want to be like MVP2112 and have a really cool B next to your name, as well as access to custom emotes and get a shout out at the end of the video, click the join button and become a channel member. It's $3.99 a month, and it's the best way to support the channel. Always remember to wash your fruit and have a fantastic day.